In the early May of 1942, the new design of a Sturmpanzer Bär, armed with 305mm L16 gun mounted in the superstructure and utilizing a Tiger I chassis, was created but never materialized. In autumn of 1942, under the influence of heavy fighting in Stalingrad, the concept of heavy infantry support vehicle was revived. Production of such a weapon was not ordered until the 5th of August 1943 by Hitler. Designed as a short-range heavy assault weapon to aid in city fighting, it arrived too late to participate in the offensive campaigns. It was suggested to mount the 38cm RTG launcher that was being developed for the Navy by Rheinmetall-Borsig into a tank chassis and used as an assault weapon. On August 5th of 1943, it was decided to mount a modified Tiger with 380mm heavy mortar. It was originally intended to arm Sturmtiger with 210mm howitzer, which was not available at the time. The recoil was around 40 tons, so the Tiger I chassis was selected. The first prototype was developed by Alket and was shown to Hitler on October 20th, 1943 at Aries, East Prussia. It took about 10 minutes to load the 761-pound shell. There was a crane that was used to help load the rounds into the vehicle. The range was around 5,900 meters. It consumed fuel at a rate of 2 gallons per mile. With armor plates as thick as 150mm and blasting projectiles weighing over 800 pounds, the unstoppable monster was immune to practically every conventional weapon on the battlefield. However, its development was actively competing against the strength of the Allied advance on all fronts, and German engineers fought to deploy the motorized cannon before it was too late. When it finally arrived on the battlefield, its powers were remarkable, destroying 3 US Sherman tanks and even razing entire building blocks. The Sturmtiger was prepared to leave its stamp on history. Self-propelled juggernauts. Tanks have been designed from the beginning to strike heavily reinforced positions from a shielded and mobile platform. When the US utilized tanks for the first time in a major fight, the rudimentary Renault FT proved capable of breaching the strong German lines throughout the Saint-Mihiel salient. However, as the conflict progressed, tanks began to face one another on the battlefield. Their primary mission subsequently moved from engaging fortified positions to combating the enemy while providing cover for infantry troops. With time, however, the tank's original purpose would resurface as a specialized vehicle capable of annihilating even the most formidable walls. The idea was simple: install a huge artillery gun in a heavy tank. As a result, strange but deadly machines like the Sturmtiger emerged. As one of the most notable examples of World War II self-propelled assault weapons, the 65-ton metal beast was created by inserting a massive 380mm RW61 rocket launcher into the chassis of a Tiger I battle tank. The end result was an unusual, almost comical-looking fighting vehicle. Nonetheless, its ability to do harm was far from amusing. Its main cannon was originally planned as a naval depth charge launcher, but was converted to serve as a land artillery solution. The payload was launched using a 2-stage rocket propellant system, with the first smaller charge propelling the projectile a short distance, just enough to clear the barrel. Following this, a more powerful solid fuel charge would detonate, propelling the massive 800-pound shell up to 4 miles away. The end result was a lethal solution capable of penetrating even the enemy's most heavily reinforced military barriers. In fact, the bullet could breach up to 8 feet of reinforced concrete, making it nearly impossible for an opposing position to prevail after being hit by one of the Sturmtiger's destructive shells. At a price. The raw devastation produced by the Sturmtiger came at a significant cost, which had to be included into tactical evaluations. The motorized cannon had a maximum capacity of 14 projectiles, requiring 1 shell to be carried inside the breech. Typically, the vehicles would enter battle with only 13 rounds, and each shot had to be meticulously planned ahead of time to ensure adequate effectiveness. Reloading was also extremely difficult and time-consuming due to the size and weight of the rounds. It took the combined efforts of all 4 crew members, as well as a specialized crane positioned on the aft deck. A skilled staff completed the agonizing process in just 10 minutes. As a result, the gun could not fire one shot after another, and it would usually fire once before changing positions and tactics and firing again. The Sturmtiger was also forced to retreat after each firing because of the high risk of being detected. The two-charge detonation produced a considerable trail of fire, smoke, and shells that could be detected from a long distance. Nonetheless, the Sturmtiger's handling of the gases produced during the initial combustion exacerbated the issue. Because the first charge was activated inside the barrel, the fumes could not be released into the crew compartment, as they would poison the vehicle's operators. Holding the vapors inside the barrel until they were clear was also not an option due to the high pressure, which could blow up the entire short barrel. To address the issue, the gun's barrel was modified with a number of small perforations around the center barrel opening. The gases produced by the initial detonation were redirected back into the barrel and released via these smaller apertures, ensuring that the pressure inside the gun was never excessive. Nonetheless, the quick release of fumes following the second charge detonation resulted in a spectacular blast of light, fire, and smoke, making the firing Sturmtiger considerably easier to identify than other artillery systems. As a result, it became common practice for Sturmtiger operators to relocate to a safer position after firing a shell. Thick layers of defense. Even though it had a number of operational issues, the Sturmtiger was an armored vehicle that was extraordinarily well protected and contained a large firepower capability. Similar to many other tank hunter hull designs of the time, the Sturmtiger was constructed with an exterior that was designed in the shape of a casemate with a front glacis plate that sloped downward. This design allowed the majority of enemy rounds to be deflected upon impact, rather than piercing the armor. In spite of the fact that the bullet might be able to pierce the sloped surface, it would be extremely difficult for it to penetrate the reinforced plates that were placed on the front of the car, which have a thickness of 150 millimeters. It was through this configuration that the 100 millimeter frontal armor plate of the Tiger I was significantly improved. The remaining parts of the vehicle had armor that ranged from 60 to 100 millimeters in thickness. This was determined by the degree of vulnerability of the components of the vehicle that were being defended, as well as the likelihood that an enemy attack would have an effect on that particular position. The Sturmtiger was a shielded behemoth that was essentially impervious to the majority of hostile weaponry that were deployed by other artillery guns. Even the formidable Soviet T-34 battle tank was unable to break through the frontal armor plates of the self-propelled German mortar. And in order to have any chance of success against the tight defenses of the Sturmtiger, it would frequently take a fortunate hit from the improved 85mm main gun of the late-arriving Soviet battle tank T-34-85. It would be possible for the crew within the vehicle to defend themselves with the MG-34 machine gun that was situated at the front of the unit in the event that any infantry troops attempted to approach the self-propelled gun with the intention of planting explosives or destroying the rails. The driver, the gunner, the loader, and the commander were all members of this crew. In addition to loading shells, the loader was also responsible for operating the anti-infantry frontal machine gun and acting as a radio man. However, loading shells was not always required or necessary. Valuating its value. When it was first created, the Sturmtiger was intended to be an offensive weapon that could travel at the same speed as other armored units, while also providing assistance to infantry as they pushed into heavily entrenched enemy territory. The purpose of the gun was to cause damage to the offensive fortifications of the enemy, causing them to retreat into the muzzles of the infantry and panzer divisions that were attacking. In spite of this, by the time the Sturmtiger made its debut in the later months of the war, Germany was mostly engaged in a defensive campaign on the majority of fronts. During the uprising that took place in Warsaw in 1944, a few prototype units were sent into battle. There, the vehicle proved to be a viable answer for dealing with considerable enemy opposition that was concealed in dense urban settings and reinforced buildings. The prototype Sturmtiger was stated to work brilliantly in assisting the German forces as they engage in combat with the Polish resistance, despite the fact that their numbers made it difficult to carry out any acts that would define the war. As a result of these Sturmtiger's devastating firepower, a great number of structures in Warsaw had been completely destroyed, and the Polish fighter was unable to defend itself against the heavily armored vehicle. After playing a significant role in the uprising in Warsaw, the Sturmtiger saw more action in the final battles that the Wehrmacht fought to protect Germany. The end of the conflict. Following its placement in a position that was not intended for it, the self-propelled artillery proved to be of limited utility in the fight against the Allied push towards Berlin. In terms of its effectiveness as a defense weapon, its size and lack of precision rendered it nearly useless. Despite this, German forces dispatched 7 Sturmtigers to help in the defensive efforts that were being made during the battle for Remagen Bridge. On the other hand, when it came time to blow up the bridge, the Sturmtigers were unable to accomplish their goal because the poor aim of their weapons prevented them from hitting the structure. In spite of the fact that they were unsuccessful, one of the troops is recognized with accomplishing an incredible achievement while the conflict was at its height. The Germans assert that a Sturmtiger that was operating close to Düren fired a 380mm round into a group of Sherman tanks that were stationed in a village, resulting in the destruction of 3 of the Sherman tanks in a single shot. The extraordinary accomplishment is still being questioned by a large number of people, and it was never made public by officials from the Allies. On the other hand, there is little doubt that the enormous Sturmtiger possesses the strength and range necessary to accomplish such a challenging task. Lastly, the weapon was an outstanding concept that showed a great deal of potential as a transportable platform. That it had the potential to be a game-changer for the Wehrmacht was despite the fact that it had very little experience in warfare. The problem was that it arrived too late.